11 spine-chilling tales exposed. Discover the cursed and sinister secrets of 2025. In a quiet suburb of Chicago, where picket fences met the anxiety of uncertain jobs, Sarah trudged through the grocery aisle. Each labeled price sent her heart racing. The sound of Jake's laughter faded as the shadows lengthened, and the familiar songs playing in the store turned into a haunting symphony of her fears. Bills piled up at home, and food was slipping through her fingers like sand. The unease tightened its grip, each grocery trip a reminder that they had maybe a month left before all hell broke loose. But it wasn't just her worries about money. It was the house across the street. The one that loomed like a ghost, the former palace of a real estate mogul who vanished without a trace. Once regal, it now stood with shattered windows and chipping paint. The neighborhood parents whispered tales, a retelling of the dark history that had transformed the place into a legend. A curse, they said. The family was greedy and they paid. On a cool autumn evening, Sarah found herself standing in front of that very home, feeling drawn in. As the wind rustled through the leaves, it felt like the house breathed in sync with her. Shadows flitted along the edges of her vision, and she shook her head. Maybe the stress was playing tricks, but rumors morphed into perceptions. She turned to leave when she heard its soft whispers leaking from the house as if someone was beckoning her inside. Goosebumps crawled up her arms, dread bubbling in her throat. "Mom, come quick," Jake called from the doorway. He was staring at his phone, eyes wide like saucers. "I just got a message from a friend." "Who?" she asked, gripping the thread of hope tightly. "Someone named Emily. She says she knows a secret about the house," he replied, his voice quivering just enough to worry her. A pit formed in Sarah's stomach. "Delete it, Jake. It's probably just a prank." Before they could talk further, a muffled whisper echoed in the living room, not from the phone, but from the walls themselves. "Trust no one." The words slid off the air, chilling her spine. The lights flickered. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Sarah forced a smile, trying to mask anxiety. But the whispers were relentless that night. The neighborhood felt smaller, more filled with eyes that watched their every move. Mrs. Anderson, the seemingly kind neighbor, offered her help. "Anything you need, dear," she'd said. Yet something in her gaze felt supernaturally shrewd. Sarah couldn't shake the thoughts. What was the real connection between the neighbors and the vanished family? Then, Jake's secret conversations became less cryptic and much darker. Words about sins and shadows infiltrated their life. Paranoia clawed at them. Friends withdrew. Murmurs turned into pointed fingers. One night, a scratching noise etched itself into Sarah's dreams, stealing her breath. Jake's eyes flickered with fear as the message on his phone glowed. "Trust no one." They stood at the edge of the abandoned house once more, adrenaline rushing through them. What if the rumors were true? What if the darkness was woven into the fabric of their community? They had no choice but to face it, understanding that unraveling the truth could rip apart everything they knew. But who or what lurking on their street could be the ultimate betrayal? The chilling sensation amplified as they got closer. Shadows danced, and secrets held their breath in the air. The darkness curled around Sarah and Jake as they approached the house. Each step felt heavier, the air thick and suffocating. The whispers from earlier clung to their ears, wrapping around them like a shroud. It felt as though the very structure of the home was alive, pulsing with a history that demanded to be unearthed. "Are we really doing this?" Jake whispered, his breath trembling. Sarah glanced at him, trying to suppress her own fear, but she saw it mirrored in his eyes. They stood at the threshold, the door ajar like a gaping mouth. "Just stay close," she urged, her heart a relentless drumbeat against her ribs. With an exhale that felt like it would be her last, she stepped inside, dragging Jake into the shadows behind her. The air reeked of mildew and rot, a heavy fog wrapping around the musty remnants of a life once lived. Dust motes floated in the weak light that slipped through the broken windows, casting ghostly images on the walls. Whispers intensified, weaving through the silence like a sinister wind. "Can you hear that?" Jake asked, eyes wide with panic. "Yeah," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It doesn't sound like just the wind." A soft scratching noise echoed from the hallway, drawing them in like a moth to flame. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet something else, a morbid curiosity, perhaps urged them deeper into the house. As they walked, an old photograph caught her eye, hanging crooked on the wall. The family gazed out from the frame. The man with a wide grin, the woman poised, and the children with hollow smiles. Their eyes seemed to follow Sarah wherever she moved. Another shudder rippled through her. "Jake, we should." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. She stifled a scream, grabbing Jake's arm as he grasped tightly onto her sleeve. "What was that?" he gasped, fear making his voice tremble. "Stay quiet," she whispered, straining to hear through the oppressive silence. In the darkness, whispers grew louder, rushing at them like a wave. Get out, trust no one." Then, a faint light illuminated the hallway ahead, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like restless spirits. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled with it, eyes wide. "It's Emily," he exclaimed, holding it up. But just as he glanced down, a loud bang echoed from within the house, such a jarring sound it sent them stumbling backward. The phone slipped from Jake's hand, hitting the ground and illuminating a ghostly figure just beyond the flickering glow. "Get out!" the figure shrieked, features obscured but eyes wide, filled with a terror that paralyzed them on the threshold. The whispers became screams, and the walls seemed to tremble. Sarah turned, and for a moment, the urge to run swirled within her. But the figure reached out, fingers skeletal and claw-like. "You don't understand. You need to leave before it's too late." Panic surged as the room spun in a chaotic whirl of shadow and light, the house itself appearing to come alive, as if it were breathing heavily, stalking its prey. With trembling hands, Sarah grabbed Jake's arm and bolted toward the door despite the chaos swirling around them, the whispers an unending siren call. But as they crossed the threshold, something icy gripped Sarah's heart. The door slammed shut behind them, casting them into the cold night air. The whispers faded, but now a low growl reverberated from within the house, dark and primordial. "Mom, we can't leave," Jake yelled, eyes wide with dread. "What if we need to help?" Sarah paused, uncertainty coursing through her veins. Their lives had already been entangled in something they didn't comprehend, one that could lead them into darkness, or perhaps it was the only truth to unravel. What had they unleashed the moment they crossed the line? And if they were to return, what price would they pay? The chill in the air was just the beginning. A fissure formed in the depths of the house as the growl deepened. They stood frozen, knowing what they had to decide, and that the true horror awaited them inside. Would they confront it together, or would it tear them apart? As Sarah squeezed Jake's hand tighter, the air stood still, heavy with unnameable dread. A wave of panic washed over Sarah as she turned to Jake. "We can't go back in there." Her voice trembled, scarcely more than a whisper against the oppressive weight of the night. But Jake wasn't listening. He stepped toward the door, desperation glowing in his wide eyes. Wait, what if someone else trapped inside? The doubt writhed in her stomach, twisting as she considered his words. That figure had looked so terrified. Maybe, somehow, they could do something about it. A thunderous crash erupted from within the house, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Dust and debris rained down from the old structure, and she stumbled, grasping frantically at a nearby tree to steady herself. Jake's fear seemed to fuel his courage. "We can't abandon them," he shouted over his shoulder, his voice cracking under the strain. "Jake, no." But he was already inching back toward the door, hands outstretched, ready to push it open. With a deep breath, Sarah wrestled her fears down, forcing herself to think beyond the panic. "Listen, we can't just charge in. Let us try to find another way." she urged, heart pounding. Each second felt like an eternity as the growl echoed from inside again, low and menacing, wrapping around her spine like ice. Suddenly, the shadows in the doorway shifted. A silhouette emerged further back in the house, a shadow that stretched long and twisted. "Help please," it rasped. The voice was scratchy, swallowed by fear and despair. "Did you hear that?" Jake's eyes brightened, filled with hope. "Yeah," she whispered, swallowing hard. "But we don't know what it is." An indecipherable sense of dread shivered through her, intensifying as the figure let out a soft, aching cry. She could feel something unnatural trying to reach through the veil between worlds. Before she could fully process what to do, Jake launched himself forward, his heart racing with determination, and shoved the door open. She stumbled after him, mind racing. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air thickened around them, and shadows whispered around their bodies, clamoring for attention. "Jake, wait!" she called out, but he dashed down the hallway toward the source of the voice, oblivious to her warning. The house groaned, the walls seeming to bulge and contract as if they were alive, and Sarah felt as if 1,000 unseen eyes were watching her as she moved deeper into the house. The temperature dropped noticeably, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. The air was heavy with melancholy and regret, and she felt an urge to turn back, to run into the night where she felt safe. "Jake!" she shouted, but her plea was swallowed by the darkness. The figure that had called for help materialized further down the hall, illuminated by a flicker of flickering light. It was a small girl, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide and begging for rescue. "Please, help me," the girl whimpered, her hands reaching out expectantly. "They want to take me, you have to save me." Jake turned to Sarah, worry etched across his face. "We can't leave her." But Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her gut. Something was wrong. Too wrong. "Jake, don't you see? This feels wrong." Before she could say more, a series of loud, crashing noises echoed around them, the air trembling with a furious energy. The girl's expression shifted, her face twisting into something dark and monstrous. "You shouldn't have come here," the child hissed, lips peeling back to reveal sharp, glistening teeth. A gasping breath rushed from Sarah's lips as she realized the truth. It was a trap. They were being lured deeper into the heart of darkness, and an unspeakable horror awaited them. "Back! Jake, we need to get out!" Panic surged as the room began to turn, shadows lunging at them, threatening to swallow them whole. But as she grabbed Jake's arm, the growl bellowed again, vibrating through the walls around them. They needed a plan, a way to escape this nightmare before they became part of it. What would it take to escape? And who would be left standing when the darkness finally consumed the light? With fear ringing in her ears, Sarah knew there was no time left to waste. The darkness swelled, hungry and insatiable, waiting for them to make their next move. Sarah felt an icy grip on her heart as the shadows swirled closer, the air thick with malice. The child's monstrous face loomed large in her mind, the sharp teeth shining in the dim light, a ghastly reminder of their peril. "We can't stay here," she screamed, pulling harder at Jake's arm, desperation clawing at her voice. But Jake was frozen, his gaze locked on the creature. "She needs help," he argued, a quiver of uncertainty creeping into his tone. The girl, no. The thing that had once been a girl was shifting, her body morphing under the flickering light into something more grotesque, more predatory. "Jake, come on!" Panic surged through Sarah, and with a surge of adrenaline, she yanked him toward the door. But the house seemed to conspire against them, shadows recoiling and plunging back into the corners, enveloping their escape route. With a primal snarl, the girl lunged forward. "You can't leave. You've come too far." Her voice was a cacophony of shrieks and laughter, unsettling and cruel. In a heartbeat, Sarah felt the darkness creep further into her mind, painting her thoughts with fear. "No, no," she gasped, turning to dart back, heart racing in terror. "This isn't real, this can't be happening." Together, they stumbled backward, shadows twisting into hands that clawed at them, desperate to pull them into the abyss. The noise was deafening, a vortex of howls and whispers merging. "Jake!" He turned to her, his expression torn. Do we really just leave her? Better her than us. The words escaped in a breathless gasp, sharp and piercing. But uncertainty loomed in those dark corners, the suffocating presence of the place haunting them. Suddenly, the growling deepened, seismic and trembling. The very structure of the house resonated with an ominous pulse, as if it had a heartbeat. The walls seemed to hold secrets, hidden voices begging them to listen, to stay. Help me echoed through the oppressive air, wrapping around them like vine-covered thorns. Run! Sarah shouted, every part of her screaming to escape. The sound seemed to snap Jake from his daze. He nodded, determination set in his eyes, and together they sprinted down the hall, the shadows leaping after them, gleeful in their relentless pursuit. The air around them felt viscous, a stifling weight that made every breath tight in their lungs. Sarah glanced back, the shrieks forming a full chorus, a myriad of lost souls echoing through the darkness. It was like running through a nightmare made manifest. The front door still far away, a distant salvation. Over here, Jake yelled, his voice treading the line of hope and despair. He lunged toward a side room, pushing through the doorframe just as the walls trembled violently. Dust rained down, and the old wood creaked as if protesting their intrusion. Sarah followed, her instincts roaring for safety. Inside, the room was starkly different, drowning in an extraordinary gloom. It was filled with fragmented mirrors, each reflection twisting their forms, amplifying dread as grotesque faces stared back. Shadows danced out of reach, their voices hissing like serpents. There was something unnervingly familiar about that room, something that clawed at her memory. Close the door, she exclaimed, but as Jake turned to obey, the mirrors whispered amidst the chaos. You belong with us forever. She grabbed his shoulder, eyes wide with terror. Look around. Something's wrong here. The mirrors seemed to pulse, the reflections of their faces shifting, the sense of twisted familiarity deepening. They were too real, too lively in their grotesque versions, flashing images of fear and pain. A muffled scream echoed from one mirror, racking her soul with dread. What is happening? Her voice trembled as she felt the eerie pull again, the house seeming to reach out with hungry fingers. Let us just break these. Jake's fists clenched, but before he could strike, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony swirling in their minds. Join us, they cooed, slithering into her consciousness, threading through her thoughts. Get out, she screamed, stumbling back, slamming into the wall. As fear ravaged her, the mirrors trembled, the shadows swirling in a wild dance of torment around them. But before they could find any means of escape, the ground beneath them rumbled again, more violently this time, and fissures opened in the floor as the space itself quaked. They needed to find a way out now. Jake, something is coming. Fear clawed at her throat like a living beast. An unseen terror was creeping toward them, and the darkness felt more alive than ever, eager to claim them for its own. As Sarah steadied herself, dread twisted in her gut. How could they get out? And what waited for them right behind? The walls vibrated with a low, guttural growl that seemed to resonate from the very heartbeat of the house. Shadows writhed, wrapping around Sarah's ankles like cold tendrils, pulling her toward the abyss that threatened to swallow them whole. Jake! She cried, her voice slicing through the thick, suffocating darkness. A last beacon of hope in a sea of despair. His eyes darted wildly, searching for clarity as the whispers clawed at their sanity. We need to move. Her words were swallowed by the echoes of their surroundings, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Before she could react, Jake wrenched open the door again, the hinges protesting as if warning against their foolishness. We have to break out of here, he shouted, the determination in his voice battling against the panic threatening to engulf them both. Together, they stumbled into a narrow corridor, the shadows trailing behind like a growing nightmare. Each step they took sent jolts of dread through Sarah's veins. The fluorescent bulbs flickered above them, plunging them into patches of darkness that felt too real, too suffocating. Go! Jake screamed, but his command was drowned out by the sudden roar that erupted around them. The walls shimmered as though the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. Tattered fragments of light broke through, casting long, jittery shadows that moved without a body. Instinct took over, and Sarah dashed forward, pulling Jake along. They ran, hearts pounding in their chests like a discordant symphony, erratic, frantic, desperate. A sense of impending doom hovered close, each step ringing louder, time twisting viciously as the house groaned around them, alive with a terrible hunger. Just as they rounded a corner, Sarah slipped, her foot catching on the uneven floor. She stumbled, feeling the cold grip of the darkness surge around her like icy fingers, whispering sweet nothings that promised safety but hinted at torment. "Jake!" she screamed, panic lacing her voice as she struggled to regain her footing. He reached for her. But in that instant, the ground she stood upon shifted, revealing a yawning chasm that twisted downward into darkness. No! She had no choice but to claw at the ground, her hands scrambling for purchase as she felt the weight of unseen hands pulling her into the void. With a grunt of effort, Jake lunged forward, pulling her away from the edge just in time. "We can't let it take us. Keep moving." With adrenaline firing through her, Sarah regained her balance. They pushed forward, driven by the primal instinct to survive. Every footfall echoed like a death knell, promising that the darkness wouldn't let them go easily. The house seemed to shift, its twisted architecture distorting under the weight of their fear. Rooms shifted, walls expanded, and exits vanished, ensnaring them in a labyrinth of terror. Sarah's heart raced as they neared another door, one that looked strangely familiar. Was it the entrance they had come through, or had they somehow circled back? Right or left? Which way? Jake's voice quivered, desperation leaking through the resolve he wore like a mask. "Left. It's gotta be left," she shouted, her instincts screaming that they needed to escape whatever horrors awaited behind them. They dashed through the door, out of the corridor, into a room bathed in an ethereal light that felt both inviting and sinister as they caught their breath. The room pulsated with energy. Something shimmered in the center, a flickering image of the girl they had seen earlier twisted in agony, her face morphing between terror and a twisted smile. "You can't escape," her voice slithered through the air, a ghostly echo. Sarah's skin crawled. "Do we fight it here?" she asked, her voice breaking. They had no weapons, only their own determination against the encroaching evil. The weight of dread pressed heavily on their minds. "Maybe we can end this now," Jake whispered, inching toward the unsettling apparition. But before they could act, an overwhelming force surged in the room, pulling every shadow from the corners, rushing to engulf them. Once more. "No, no, no," Sarah screamed, as frantic hands yanked at them from all directions. The walls groaned, the light flickered, and the room began to twist around them as the shadows clamored for their essence as the darkness drew closer. A chilling thought struck Sarah. Were they meant to join the girl in her torment? And just like that, the very floor beneath them cracked open, a dark maw widening. "Jake, we have to," she began. But the words were lost as a cacophony of screams enveloped them. What awaited them beneath? Would they truly be consumed by the very shadows they fought to escape? The questions echoed in her mind as the world fell away beneath their feet. As the void swallowed them, time disintegrated. Sarah and Jake plummeted into darkness, the screams of the girl still echoing around them, twisting into a haunting melody that pulled at the edges of their sanity. Cold rushed past them, a bitter wind that clawed at their skin as if the darkness itself sought to strip them bare. With a violent jolt, they landed on a damp, hard surface. Breathless, disoriented, Sarah blinked against an unfamiliar, dim light. It wasn't the oppressive blackness they had been falling through. This felt different, thicker, almost alive. Surrounding them was a vast cavern dotted with grotesque stone formations, twisted like the contorted faces of tortured souls. "Are we alive?" Jake murmured, his voice barely a whisper against the silence that hung heavy in the air. Sarah pushed herself into a sitting position. "I think so." She could feel the ground pulsing beneath her, almost like a heartbeat. The realization made her stomach churn. But where are we? In front of them loomed a massive archway, carved into the rock, with symbols shimmering faintly across its surface. It felt ancient, forbidden. The light pulsing from the stones cast unsettling shadows that danced in rhythm with their racing hearts. "Let us go through," Jake urged, staring at the archway, drawn to it like a moth to flame. "No, wait." Sarah trembled, uncertain. "What if it's a trap?" "We don't have time to debate," he replied, the urgency in his voice rising. "Whatever is after us, one T-stop, and we can't stay here." With a hesitant nod, she gritted her teeth and followed him as he stepped forward, hand reaching for the archway. The air around them thickened, electric with anticipation. Just as they reached the threshold, a low, guttural growl rumbled through the chamber, louder than the heartbeat of the ground beneath. Sarah froze, dread flooding her system. Jake too late. The moment Jake touched the archway, the symbols flared bright, and the cavern shook violently. The mocking faces in the stone writhed as if alive, their mouths opening in silent screams. "Run!" Jake shouted, pulling Sarah back just in time as a wave of energy exploded from the archway, sending shards of stone flying. They staggered backward, narrowly avoiding the onslaught. The noise was deafening. The air crackled with dark energy that seemed to reach out, eager to ensnare them. Sarah's survival instincts kicked in as she turned on her heel. "This way," she yelled, leading the charge deeper into the cavern. With every step, they could feel the darkness chasing them, a palpable presence that clawed at their minds and whispered twisted promises. The flickering light dwindled. Shadows became solid, seeping into every crevice. "Jake, I think it's going to trap us," Sarah shouted, glancing back as twisted entities seemed to gather behind them, their shapes blurry yet dreadfully familiar. The faces, the girl's face among them. "Don't look back," Jake yelled, desperation mingling with fear. "Keep moving." They ran blindly, their adrenaline pumping as their feet pounded against the cold, damp stone. The cavern stretched endlessly, but a faint glimmer of light appeared up ahead, almost like a beacon in their pitch-black world. "Is that an exit?" Sarah gasped, hope igniting within her. "Let us find out." Jake surged forward, determination glazing his eyes. But just as they neared the light, a deafening roar erupted from behind, a sound that vibrated through their very bones. The shadows lunged, reaching for them with long, grasping tendrils, trying to drag them back into the heart of the abyss. "No, no, no!" Sarah screamed, her lungs burning. The light flickered, wavering as if it sensed their fear, but the darkness surged forward relentlessly. "Almost there," Jake urged, their fingers nearly grazing the shimmering barrier. Would the light be their salvation, or would the shadows claim them? As the tendrils wrapped around their ankles, pulling them down, they pushed harder toward the radiance. The question burned in Sarah's mind, insatiable and urgent. Could they outrun the darkness, or were they destined to be lost forever? With one last ounce of strength, they broke free, leaping toward the light, but would it really save them or merely reveal a deeper horror lurking beyond? Sarah's heart raced as she reached out, the light kissing her fingertips, but what awaited them on the other side? The moment Sarah's fingertips brushed against the light, a sudden warmth enveloped her, erasing the chilling grip of darkness, if only for a heartbeat. She spun, pulling Jake with her. Their eyes widened as the cavernous shadows recoiled, the screeches of the shadowy figures growing weaker. But the relief was short-lived. The brightness pulsated, changing from soothing to blinding, searing into their retinas. They staggered, disoriented, unsure of where they were as the light surged around them, twisting into an ethereal tunnel. No, not a tunnel, more like a vortex, spiraling and drawing them deeper into its embrace. "Jake, what's happening?" Sarah shouted, panic ripping through her gut. "Hold on," he replied, his grip tightening around her wrist. He was strong, but she could feel their bodies pull apart as the swirling light intensified. Fear clawed at her throat as they were pulled into the whirlpool. The world around them shifted grotesquely, bending and warping into an unfathomable landscape. Suddenly, they landed hard on a cold, stone floor, the brightness dimming, leaving behind only dying fragments of light twisting above them. They lay still, breathless. Shadows flickered, intertwining with the remnants of light. Sarah scrambled to her feet first, tugging Jake up by the arm. Her heart raced as she surveyed their new surroundings. The place resembled the world above but was distorted, like a twisted reflection in a cracked mirror. Gnarled trees loomed with bark like charcoal, and a fierce wind carried whispers that seemed to seep into their bones. Strange creatures scuttled away at their movement, eyes glinting with malice. "Where are we?" Jake's voice trembled, tinged with awe and fear. "I don't know." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, the shadows tugging at her mind, urging her to succumb to despair. "But we need to find a way out." The atmosphere thrummed with tension. Each breath felt weighted, heavy with dread. The shadows lengthened, moving closer, weaving around the perimeter of the forest like sentries. "Look," Jake pointed, his face pale but focused. Just ahead, silhouetted against the dim light, was what appeared to be a pathway, a narrow corridor of stone leading deeper into the dark woods. The sounds of rustling branches filled the air, like 1,000 secrets whispering just out of reach. "Should we check it out?" Sarah questioned, heart racing with uncertainty. Before Jake could answer, the pulse of the shadows turned frantic, a growing hunger creeping along the ground toward them. "Now! We have to go now!" he urged, pulling her toward the path. They sprinted down the corridor, the trees closing in, branches snapping in the wake of their flight. A sense of tenacity overcome their dread as they pressed through the suffocating darkness. The further they went, the more the landscape shifted, an endless spiral of twisted trees and shadows that seemed to breathe. "Do you hear that?" Sarah suddenly halted, eyes wide. "What?" Jake's brows knotted. "Voices," she replied, trembling. She strained to listen, the whispers growing clearer. They weren't just echoes in the night. They were cries of despair, heart-wrenching and familiar. "Help us!" Panic surged in her chest. Those voices, they sound like she trailed off, a cold reality settling over her. "Sarah, focus. We can't stop," Jake hissed, his grip tightening on her arm. But the tendrils of the shadows encircled them once more, a dark tapestry of torment weaving through the air. She tried to shake her head, fleeing from the realization. The girl's face, twisted in suffering, loomed in her mind. Are we going to see them again?" Sarah managed a whisper, fear coursing like ice through her veins as realization struck. "Keep moving," Jake shouted, dragging her along, their hearts pounding together as they pressed forward into the tumult. But the path ahead began to splinter, diverging into countless darkened corridors veiled by shadows. Each passage bore an insistent whisper that seemed to call to them, promising salvation or leading to an even worse fate. "Which way?" Sarah panted, the walls around them trembling. "Just pick one," Jake yelled, desperation dripping from his every word. As they stood at the fork, shadows curled around them, painting the choice in a swirl of impending dread. Could they make the right choice? Or would they fall deeper into the suffocating darkness? Their breaths captured in the chill of the air, both suddenly knew. The true horrors lay just ahead, and the choice might seal their fate. Which path would they dare to choose? The whispers beckoned louder with each second ticking away. The whispers grew, a maddening symphony of fear and yearning that filled the air with an eerie cadence. "Do you feel it?" Sarah gasped, eyes darting between the shadowy corridors that loomed like darkened jaws ready to swallow them whole. "Shut up. Focus." Jake's tone was clipped, urgency crackling like static between them. He tugged on her hand, but she didn't move. It felt like the walls were pulsating, alive with hunger, shifting around them as if they were part of a terrible heartbeat. "What if we choose wrong?" Her voice trembled, a whisper barely rising above the cacophony. She could almost see the shadows dancing at the edges of each passageway, swirling around like smoke, eager to capture them. It was as if they were pointing, promising release or doom, blinking with malevolent delight. "Just make a choice," Jake barked, the frustration boiling through his own fears. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to drown out the voices. "Help us." The sound was clearer now, pulling at her heart, the desperation knife-like in its urgency. She could hear children crying, pleading, familiar cries, Memories she had buried deep came flooding back. Her little brother, lost in the woods near their home, his voice carried by the wind. Sarah. Jake's plea dragged her back as his grip tightened around her wrist. I know this voice. The weight of realization crashed into her, sending chills through her spine. How is this possible? Is this some kind of sick joke? Look, we don't have time. I see light down that one. He pointed towards a distant glimmer that barely cut through the darkness, flickering like a dying candle. What if it's worse than here? Her heart raced, each beat closer to screaming. We can't stay. We need to go. The desperation in his eyes mirrored her own fear, twisting into a potent, suffocating blend. She recalled the shadows, how they had chased them into this nightmarish place, how they had whispered behind every eerie crackle and gust of wind. Do you think the voices are real? She asked, shaking. Would it matter? They're all we have right now. We just have to trust ourselves and each other. Against her instincts yelling to retreat, she nodded, filled with an adrenaline-fueled resolve. Okay, let us go toward the light. They sprinted, feet pounding against the cold stone, the glimmer growing brighter, the shadows screaming behind them in fury. With every step, an oppressive force pressed against their backs, rushing to devour them whole. As they approached the light, thick shadows lashed out, catching at their ankles, trying to snare them back into the murky depths of despair. Keep going, Sarah shouted, horror spilling into her words like venom. Desperation surged again. She wouldn't let them pull her back into that darkness, not when freedom felt so tantalizingly close. Finally bursting through, they stumbled and fell into a new realm. The ground was softer, paved with grains of sand that sparkled like stars under a cold, watchful sky. Sarah, what is this place? Jake breathed, awe and trepidation mingling in his voice. Before them lay an expansive desert, illuminated by twin moons that cast long shadows across the barren landscape. But there was something unsettling in the silence that enveloped them. Look, Sarah pointed. A pulsating red light flickered far off in the distance, hovering like a heartbeat against the stillness, as shadows danced bizarrely beneath its glow, beckoning them closer. Jake turned to her, his eyes researching her face for a hint of fear or hope. Do we go toward it? What if it's a trap? I don't know. But we can't stay here. The words escaped her lips with an unexpected urgency. The shadows from earlier lingered just at the edge of their vision, whispering promises of despair. Sarah? And then, in the distance, a low, chilling whisper echoed through the stillness. Once more, they heard the cries. Anguished pleas of lost souls echoing across the desert, a chorus of despair and longing. Sarah shuddered, her heart pounding in sync with the eerie pulse around them. We have to decide, Jake, but the longer we wait, the closer they come. Are we strong enough for this? His question hung in the air, thicker than the shadows trailing behind them. Suddenly, the light flickered and dimmed, and a new sound sliced through the atmosphere, the unrelenting, hungry roar of the approaching shadows. In that heart-stopping moment, Sarah felt the weight of the decision crush her. Was the pulsing light their salvation or their doom? Just as they were about to take their first step forward, the ground trembled beneath them, and shadows surged like a rising tide. Would they face the light or succumb once more to the clawing darkness? The shadows lunged at them, swirling like tempestuous clouds, a dark tide rising to claim its new victims. Panic seized Jake's heart as he grabbed Sarah's arm urgently. We have to move now. What if it's worse? She replied, her voice barely audible through the thunderous whispers that wrapped around them like barbed wire. It's worse if we stay. He couldn't articulate how deeply he felt that truth, the air thick with dread. They had already danced too close to despair. With a final glance back, Sarah sprinted alongside Jake toward the pulsating red light. Each step felt like running through molasses, the grit of sand beneath their feet slow and heavy. The ground thrummed beneath them, vibrating like a warning. Closer and closer. The light flickered, revealing strange elongated shapes lurking just beyond the periphery, swaying figures cloaked in darkness. Sweat trickled down Sarah's back, her breath coming in sharp gasps as they edged into the glow. Look, Jake shouted, pointing to a figure stepping from the shadows. It was a child, small and frail, with hollow eyes that glistened in the red light. "Do you see? That is my brother." "No, it can't be. It's not real," Sarah yelled, tugging him back. A collective gasp escaped from both of them as the child reached out with tiny, bony fingers. The air crackled, a current of despair distorting reality around them. "Jake!" she screamed, her instincts raging against them. "We can't trust it." But he was transfixed, paralyzed by the false hope tangled with grief. I need to help him," the child smiled, a twisted grin that sent a chill through Sarah's core. "Come closer." "It's safe," the shadows behind them surged, closing in, feeding off their hesitation. Sarah felt icy tendrils wrap around her ankles, tugging. "Jake, please!" In a burst of defiance, she wrested his grip and charged toward the light. "We have to go." The moment they crossed the threshold of the glow, they were engulfed in warmth. For a heartbeat, she thought they had escaped, but the relief was fleeting, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The child dissolved into a plume of smoke, laughter echoing around them, reverberating like the sound of breaking glass. The warmth vanished, replaced by a frosty dread. Mapping out their surroundings, Sarah saw muscles of shadows pulsing around them, ready to circle once more. "What was that?" Jake said, his voice trembling. "A trap," Sarah cursed under her breath. "We just walked into a demon's playground." She surveyed the terrain, searching for an escape. The pulsating red light wavered, more erratic now, shifting in color like a malfunctioning beacon, all the while emanating a low, steady thrum that matched the beat of her racing heart. The voices united again, this time in a haunting symphony, weaving through her thoughts. "Come home, be one of us," they coiled around her. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Jake!" she shouted, but he was staring, lost in the depths of this newfound light. "Can't you hear them? They're lost, Sarah." His expression twisted with desperation. "No, it's feeding on your pain." With a sudden realization, Sarah's gut twisted. What if the shadows are drawing strength from our fears, our despair? Jake hesitated, the flicker of understanding crossing his face, fear battling with love. "What do we do?" "Stop listening," she cried. "We fight back." As the shadows surged, hungry claws reaching for them, she thought of all the pain, her brother, the moments she'd surrendered to despair. "Jake, hold my hand." She clasped his palm tightly, grounding each other amid chaos. "We face it together." As they linked hands, the shadows paused, as if confused. Wisps of light began to swirl around them, clashing against the darkness, illuminating the dreadful space with hope. Then, in that instant of clarity, the ground trembled violently again, a violent shaking that threatened to swallow them whole. "No!" Jake shouted as the vibrant light flickered. A new sound laced the air, a low rumble punctuating their impending doom. "What's happening?" Sarah's voice trembled. The horizon split, revealing a crevice that gaped open beneath them, leading to black nothingness. "Sarah!" Jake screamed in that moment. The ground heaved, and they were pitched forward, grasping desperately at the fading light, caught between the mercy of hope and the all-consuming darkness. Would they find a way to pull themselves back from the brink? Or would they, too, be swallowed by the shadows forever? As the chasm opened beneath them, Sarah and Jake felt the ground shift violently, gripping each other's hands tightly as the last remnants of light flickered around them, like stars dying one by one. The roar of the shadows grew louder, a cacophony of screams and whispers that clawed at their sanity. Time stretched, a moment stretching into infinity as they teetered on the edge of despair. "Hold on," Jake shouted, his voice raw with fear. Sarah's heart raced, and in that moment, she felt something in her shift, not just fear but a fierce resolve. The shadows could take everything from them, but they wouldn't take their will to fight back. "Jake, we need to let go," she yelled, the words bursting forth from her lips like a desperate prayer. "What?" he gasped, incredulous. "They're feeding on our fear. We have to let go of what holds us back." The shadows pulsed and writhed around them, eager for the taste of despair. But she realized that the pain they carried, a burden of loss, fear, and heartache was a weight that dragged them down. Together, she urged. On the count of 3, Jake's eyes widened, and he nodded, understanding the urgency in her voice. Just trust me. They counted 1, the ground quaked, shadows roaring louder. 2, a darkness encroached, but light shimmered at the edges of their vision, pulse flickering with an ancient power. 3, without hesitation, they released their grip on their fears, letting go of the pain that weighed them down. In that instant, the shadows surged forward, but so did an explosion of light. The house began to tremble, the very structure groaning as if waking from a nightmare. The walls melted away, and the darkness that had swarmed them recoiled, screeching in anger. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and they pushed forward, unshackled from their burdens. The walls of the cavern distorted and shifted, bizarre angles opening into a blinding corridor of pure light. They sprinted, feeling the warmth engulf them like a long-lost embrace, the shadows peeling away from their path in a chorus of furious screams. The air crackled and sang as the pervasive gloom shrank until it was nothing more than a distant murmur as they burst through the threshold. The ground beneath them changed once more, transitioning from oppressive stone to the softer earth of their neighborhood. They fell to their knees, breathless but free, surrounded by the familiar sight of their street. Are we back?" Jake stammered, wide-eyed. Sarah looked around, tears blurring her vision. The cursed house loomed behind them, but somehow, it felt different, far less imposing. Its windows no longer dark. The shadows faded into mere whispers, dissipating into the air like wisps of smoke. "Yeah, we're home," she breathed, disbelief mixing with relief. They stood, and in that moment, the weight they had carried for so long lifted. It wasn't just the horrors they had faced in the house that vanished. It was the scars of their hearts and the fear of letting go. But that echo of loss still lingered between them, the unspoken memories of their journey intertwined with hope. "We did it, Jake." Her voice was a fragile whisper of triumph. "Together," he replied, a smile breaking through, the last remnants of the shadows fading from his eyes. A new dawn broke over the horizon. Their lives would be different, scars remained, but they were free, a boundless potential lay ahead. As they stepped away from the lingering memories of the horror behind them, they felt stronger, woven together by shared resilience. With a glance back at the house, they whispered a silent goodbye to the darkness, knowing they'd won the ultimate battle, the choice to step into the light. They walked away, hand in hand, embracing the unknown but filled with light, ready for the future. And in their hearts burned the flame of hope, forever reminding them that even in the deepest shadows, there is power in courage. Now, listen up. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on exclusive stories just like this one. Smash that like button to help this message spread, and flood the comments section with your reactions. What did you think of the ending? I want to hear it all. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this amazing conclusion. Your support matters more than you know. Let's build this community together.